Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you couldn't imagine they'd hurt you until they did at the exact moment you needed them most? My name is Alex, and what I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a warning. When I checked into the hospital for what should have been a life-saving heart surgery, I believed I was in good hands, not just with the doctors, but with the woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with. I didn't expect the worst pain to come after the surgery. Not from my chest, but from her. While I was unconscious fighting for my life, she was fighting for something else control over everything my father left me. Not out of love, not out of need, but out of cold, calculated greed. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how people reveal who they truly are when they think you're too weak to fight back. It's also about what happens when you're not. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, this story will hit close. Stay until the end. It might just change how you protect your life, your legacy, and your heart. And if this resonates with you, leave a comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. My full name is Alex Alexandro. I'm a civil engineer, 45 years old, born and raised in Denver. For most of my life, I thought I understood structure, how to design things that could withstand storms, earthquakes, time itself. But nothing in my training prepared me for the slow collapse of something far more fragile: trust. I met Lucia 9 years ago at a green infrastructure seminar. She was standing by the refreshment table, laughing with the kind of lightness that makes you want to believe in good things again. She was an interior designer newly relocated from Santa Fe, bright, articulate, full of curiosity. We exchanged numbers over coffee and were inseparable within a month. By the end of that year, we were married in a small garden ceremony behind my father's house. My father, Harold Alexandro, was never flashy. He worked as an electrician for 40 years, spent weekends fixing things around the neighborhood, and clipped coupons even when he didn't need to. He never went on vacations, never bought a new car, and never complained. He believed in earning your peace. When he passed away 3 years into my marriage, it shattered me in ways I hadn't anticipated. But what I didn't know at the time was that Lucia's eyes were not on the headstone. They were on the account statements. Dad left me a little over $400,000, his life's work tucked away in diversified bonds, a modest investment portfolio, and a trust account in my name. He never liked the idea of joint ownership, even with family. "If it's meant for you, it stays with you," he used to say. At the time, I thought he was just old school. Now I know better. Lucia and I were still living in the same townhouse we'd bought together before Dad passed. She had her own clients, and I never questioned her expenses. She contributed fairly in the early years. We shared bills, vacations, even DIY home projects. She was present, supportive, funny. We planned for kids, talked about maybe moving to the suburbs one day. A simple life, one we could both shape together. But in the months after Dad's passing, I noticed a subtle shift. Lucia, once grounded and practical, began speaking in abstract tones about energy vibrational alignment, soul contracts. She followed spiritual influencers who seemed more like lifestyle marketers than healers. She signed up for workshops about personal awakening, female sovereignty, and self-actualization. It started with a weekend yoga retreat. Then came the full moon fasting, and eventually month-long wellness immersions that cost more than my semester at college. Still, I supported it. Maybe it was grief, I told myself. Maybe she was trying to find peace in her own way. I didn't want to be the kind of man who controlled his wife's healing process. So I paid the bills. I encouraged the journaling. I waited. Then came the questions. At first they were casual. "Hey, what bank did your dad use again?" Or "Do you know how your trust account is managed?" But soon they became more pointed. "Shouldn't we be building our future together? Or don't you think it's time I have access too?" She framed them around unity and mutual trust, never in confrontation, always in concern. I wanted to believe her. After all, we were married. We were partners. That's what I told myself again and again. But something in her tone didn't match the words. There was calculation where there used to be curiosity. I just couldn't name it yet. Looking back, it's strange how betrayal starts not with an explosion, but with a whisper. Not with a knife to your back, but with a hand on your shoulder. And a quiet request to see your passwords. It's easy to spot betrayal in hindsight. You trace the lines, connect the dots, and suddenly the picture is crystal clear. But when you're in it, when you love someone, you excuse the things that don't quite make sense. You fill in the blanks with trust. And that's how you get blindsided. The first real sign that something was off came on my 44th birthday. I had just returned from a business trip in Seattle, exhausted but glad to be home. Lucia didn't even look up from her phone when I walked in. No hug, no dinner plans, just a distracted hey. That might seem small, but in a marriage, small changes are loud if you're paying attention. Around the same time my health started to decline. It began with shortness of breath, then chest pain. I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect that had worsened over time. My cardiologist explained that I needed surgery soon or risk permanent damage. The news shook me. I was scared, vulnerable in a way I'd never felt before. Lucia's reaction wasn't what I expected. There was no panic, no tears. She nodded quietly and said something like, "Everything happens for a reason." She told me to trust the process, and then 2 days later, she left for another retreat. This one was in Sedona, themed around energy realignment and personal sovereignty. I stayed home making doctor's appointments and trying to figure out if I needed to write a will. When she returned, she was different, softer on the surface but colder underneath. She started talking more about separation, not divorce, but energetic separation. She said my energy was clouding her clarity, that my health crisis was triggering something in her that she couldn't explain. She blamed it on ancestral trauma, whatever that meant. All I heard was distance. The financial conversations became more frequent. She began asking for full access to our joint accounts, said she wanted to help manage things while I was in recovery. When I hesitated, she grew defensive. "Don't you trust me?" she'd ask, eyes wide, but voice tight. And of course I said I did. Because I did, or I wanted to. But then I noticed withdrawals. Small ones, at first 200 here, 500 there. Always with vague explanations, organic supplements, retreat deposits, a friend who needed help. I checked the records more closely and saw charges in cities she'd never mentioned visiting. When I brought it up, she got quiet, then burst into tears, accused me of not supporting her healing journey. I backed down. Then came the night she asked me to sign power of attorney paperwork just in case the surgery went wrong. It was slipped between 2 envelopes while we were watching a documentary. She made it seem casual, routine. I didn't sign it, not because I suspected anything, but because my father's voice echoed in my mind. If something feels rushed, slow it down. Still, I told myself it was probably nothing, that maybe I was the one being paranoid. After all, she was my wife. What I didn't understand then is that manipulation doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like spiritual enlightenment, like compassion, like someone trying to help, but only when helping means gaining access. Lucia wasn't pulling away because I was weak. She was creating space so she could move without resistance, and I blindly, lovingly was making it easy. The day of the surgery came with an eerie calm. I remember lying in the hospital bed, heart monitor beeping steadily beside me, trying to slow my thoughts. Lucia sat by my side holding my hand. She had tears in her eyes, and for a moment I let myself believe they were for me. That she was scared, that she still cared. But looking back, those weren't tears of love. They were tears of relief. She was waiting for the anesthesia, not the outcome. The surgery went longer than expected. Complications with the valve replacement kept me under for over 7 hours. I was sedated for 2 days afterward. What I didn't know, lying unconscious in that sterile room, was that Lucia had already put a plan in motion. Using a signed check I'd left in the house for emergencies and documents she had slowly collected over the past few months, copy of my ID Bank login credentials, and yes, that unsigned power of attorney form she'd eventually forged, Lucia gained control over a dormant secondary account tied to my father's estate. One that still held over $280,000 in long-term assets, which I hadn't yet moved into the trust. She didn't drain it all at once. That would have triggered alerts. She moved it in chunks, $45,000, to a wellness business account she had opened weeks earlier, under her name another $60,000 into a separate savings account at a different bank. The rest was cleverly funneled through small transfers masked as investment trial movements. It was a move so precise it shocked me when I eventually discovered it. Lucia wasn't reckless. She was patient, and she knew exactly when I would be weakest. I woke up 2.5 days later, dazed and groggy, but alive. The doctor smiled. The nurses congratulated me. Lucia wasn't there. I figured she was exhausted, maybe resting at home. It wasn't until the 4th day when I tried to check my email and noticed several security alerts that my gut began to whisper something I didn't want to hear. I requested a printout of my bank logins. Nothing worked. Everything was locked out. It took another day to get in touch with my financial advisor, one who had worked closely with my father and knew me personally. When he called back, his voice was tense. "Alex." I wasn't sure if I should call the police. Something's wrong. I listened in silence as he listed transfers, account closures, new beneficiaries. The estate account was nearly empty. The assets had been liquidated during the time I was under anesthesia. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the ceiling and let the weight of it sit in my chest like a second surgery. Lucia had waited until I was unconscious to strip my father's legacy away. It wasn't just theft, it was desecration. Later that night, I received a message. It was from her. No apology, no remorse, just a calm, almost smug paragraph that read, "I've moved the funds into accounts where they'll actually grow and serve a higher purpose. You don't understand what I need anymore, Alex. I need freedom. You have your health now, and I have my clarity. Consider this the clean break we both need." Attached to it were screenshots, account balances, her new wellness brand, a logo, a tagline that read, "Healing begins with truth." She had even changed her last name. No longer Lucia Alexandro. Now she was Lucia Vega, founder and CEO of some faux spiritual startup. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was symbolic. She hadn't just stolen from me, she'd taken my father's final gift, stripped it of meaning, and rebranded it as her next chapter. I set the phone down and sat quietly in the hospital bed. I-4 still taped to my hand, heart still fragile, and whispered the only word that came to mind. Unbelievable. But even then, even after everything, I wasn't angry. Not yet, because part of me still didn't believe it was real. I was a man trying to recover from surgery. I didn't know that I'd also have to recover from a marriage. There's a moment after every betrayal where you stand at a crossroads. Either you react emotionally and burn everything down, or you step back, breathe, and start drawing your map. I chose the latter. The night I got home from the hospital, the house felt colder, not because the heat was off, but because it was empty. Lucia hadn't returned. Her side of the closet was half cleared. No note, just a scent of lavender and silence. I sat in the living room staring at the walls I once helped her paint and decided no screaming, no begging, no threats. If she thought I was too weak to fight back, I'd let her keep thinking that. I called Raymond, a private asset protection consultant. Not the kind you find in flashy TV ads. The kind my father once used when a business partner tried to forge ownership papers in the late 90s. Raymond had gray hair, spoke in facts, and never repeated a sentence. He didn't flinch when I explained the situation. "You're not the first, Alex," he said calmly. "You just got hit at your softest point. Let's find out what she really took." Together, we reconstructed everything. Raymond ran a deep audit across financial activity over the past 6 months. He flagged the new accounts, traced where the estate money had gone, and uncovered shell companies that Lucia had created, some with names that mimicked nonprofits, others disguised as consulting firms. It was all part of the same illusion that this was a spiritual evolution, not a financial extraction. But here's the thing Lucia didn't know. My father, ever the cautious man, had created two separate vehicles for his estate. One was a liquid account that I was managing personally, the one she had targeted. But the other, a locked LLC-based trust, housed under a quiet investment firm in Wyoming, earning slow but stable returns. Access required biometric verification and two-factor authentication tied to my voice and my attorney's confirmation. She had never known it existed. While she was siphoning off the visible funds, I still had access to nearly $200,000 untouched, protected. It wasn't just money. It was leverage. It was my father's safety net, activated not by instinct, but by foresight. Raymond also found something else, a document Lucia had edited, a forged letter authorizing the transfer of assets while I was in surgery. The digital signature had metadata, timestamps, time, IP addresses. It was enough to question legality, enough to push a legal case if needed. But I didn't move yet. Instead, I waited. I spent my days quietly gathering documents, screenshots, confirmation letters, transfer records. I built a paper wall, not to attack, but to defend. And as I did, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. It was about protecting the one thing she hadn't been able to take, my dignity. My father's trust in me. She'd made her move in the dark. Now it was my turn. But I'd be doing it in daylight, with facts, with laws, with a calm she wouldn't expect. Because when someone tries to rob you at your weakest, the most powerful thing you can do is get stronger in silence. And when the silence breaks, you don't shout. You speak like a man who's already won. It was 5 days after I'd returned from the hospital when Lucia finally called. The name lit up my screen like a fire alarm in the middle of the night, unexpected, sharp, and somehow both familiar and foreign. I let it ring 3 times before answering, not out of hesitation, out of control. "Alex," she said, her voice soft, like nothing had happened. "I figured you were back home by now." "How are you feeling?" I didn't respond to the question. Instead, I said, "Why are you calling?" She let out a theatrical sigh. "Because we need to talk. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." There it was, the same tone she'd used the last year, whenever she wanted something gentle, but coated with assumption. Like I'd already agreed. Like she still thought she had that kind of power over me. "I just thought we could handle this like adults," she continued. "We both know our marriage has been struggling. This isn't just about money, it's about growth. About stepping into the lives we were meant to live. Separately." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice flat. "You forged my signature, transferred estate assets while I was unconscious, and opened shell companies under false identities. That's not growth, Lucia. That's a felony." Her voice faltered for half a second, then recovered. "You don't have to be dramatic. We had joint access, remember? And you never said the inheritance was off limits. You told me once that we'd build our future together. I also told you I trusted you," I replied. Clearly that didn't hold up either. She grew colder. "Look, I didn't call to fight. I called to propose a clean break. I'll waive spousal support if you don't challenge the transfers. We split the house equity and remaining savings. I walk away. You walk away." I almost smiled. She still thought I was bluffing. Still believed I was the man lying in that hospital bed, sedated, unaware, naive. "You're assuming I'm playing defense?" I said calmly. "That's a mistake." A beat of silence. Then, sharp and sudden, came the accusation. "You're hiding money. I know there's more than what was in that account. Your dad wouldn't leave you just that. I've seen his books. There's got to be more. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. I just said you should definitely have your lawyer look into that. I'm sure they'll find whatever they're meant to find." Her voice shifted again, less confident now. "Alex, you're being too calm. It's kind of scary." I didn't flinch. "You said this was for the best, that we're both stepping into clarity. I'm simply agreeing with you." She paused, then said, "Just don't forget I still have legal access to the accounts, the ones you didn't close." That's when I knew she had no idea what I'd discovered. No clue what was protected, what was documented, what was already prepared. "You're right," I told her. You do have access, but only to what I wanted you to find." She hung up first, and for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt it. Not anger, not relief, but leverage. She thought she'd ended the game, but I had just started playing. The meeting was scheduled for 10:01 a.m. at a law office downtown. Neutral ground, clean marble floors, polished oak table, bottled water already uncapped and waiting. I arrived 5 minutes early alone. No attorney, no assistant, just a folder in my hand and clarity in my chest. Lucia walked in with her lawyer 2 minutes late, dressed in soft ivory looking almost saintly. Her hair was curled makeup just right, like she was preparing for a press conference, not a legal negotiation. Her lawyer, a man named Gavin Carr, offered a rehearsed handshake and an overly warm smile. He sat across from me and opened his leather binder like he was presenting a seminar. I said nothing. "Mr. Alexandro," he began, "thank you for agreeing to meet. My client and I are here today to propose a fair, clean dissolution of the marriage. No hostility, no courtroom drama, just a mature, responsible settlement between two adults." I nodded. I'd like to hear it. Carr launched into it. Lucia was prepared to forego spousal support in exchange for 50% of the marital assets, including the house, the shared accounts, and what he described as undisclosed inheritance holdings. His tone was confident, like he believed I'd fold quickly. He even threw in language about spiritual alignment and mutual respect. When he finished, I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward him. "What's this?" he asked. "Documentation," I said. "Bank records, transfer histories, screenshots, company registration forms." And a timeline starting 3 months before my surgery, leading all the way to the last transaction made from the joint account she accessed while I was unconscious. He flipped through the first few pages, his brow tightening with each one. Lucia leaned over her expression, shifting from curiosity to concern. "What is all that?" The proof, I said, that everything she took wasn't just unethical, it was traceable. Every dollar, every fake company, every account moved under her new name. She stiffened. "You're exaggerating. We shared those funds. I had access." Carr spoke next, slower now. "Access, perhaps. But if these funds were legally designated as non-marital property, and it appears they were then transferring them without explicit consent, could trigger a violation, especially given your client's actions occurred while Mr. Alexandro was under sedation. That could be seen as intentional exploitation." Then came the bigger reveal. I reached into the folder and pulled out a notarized document 8 years old, signed during our home purchase, but never formally discussed again. The prenup. Lucia squinted. "That's not—" "It is," I said, sliding it forward, "signed, witnessed, and notarized. You remember my father insisted we sign it before finalizing the deed to the house. You said it was just paperwork. But it wasn't." Carr reviewed it in silence. Lucia's face went pale. Clause 17. Any attempt to transfer, redirect, or liquidate assets inherited solely by one party without explicit written and witnessed consent constitutes a forfeit of claim to all remaining shared property. She tried to laugh. "That can't be legal." "It's more than legal," Carr muttered, still reading. "It's airtight." Silence fell over the room. Heavy, honest, unforgiving. Lucia looked at me not with anger, not with rage, but with something I'd never seen from her before. Fear. "Alex," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to." "You meant to start over," I cut in. "You said it yourself. This is the clean break, right?" She was shaking now. "Please, we can fix this. I'll give the money back. I'll close the accounts. We can talk." I stood up. "Keep the money," I said, voice even. "Call it tuition. You just paid to learn who I really am." As I walked toward the door, Carr called after me. "Mr. Alexandro, are you pursuing criminal charges?" I paused. "Not yet," I said without turning around. "That depends on how honest she wants to be in the next 30 days. And then I left quietly but completely in control. The silence after that meeting didn't last long. Within a week, Lucia's carefully constructed narrative began to collapse under its own weight. Her wellness brand accounts were flagged for suspicious activity. Several of the shell companies Raymond had uncovered were revealed to have no business licenses, no real operations, just names on paper and empty promises in online bios. Her followers, once loyal and hypnotized by her spiritual jargon, started asking questions. Donations dried up, collaborations fell through, and then came the lawsuits. One of the investors she'd convinced, ironically, a woman she'd met at a retreat in Tulum, filed a complaint for fraud. Claimed Lucia had promised returned spiritual healing and business mentorship, but delivered nothing except Instagram reels and invoices. That triggered a broader inquiry. Bank accounts were frozen, tax records reviewed. She'd moved too fast, too confidently without covering her tracks. The man she had been seeing, some transformational coach named Adrian, ghosted her the moment things got messy. His website disappeared. So did he. According to Raymond's sources, Adrian had used multiple aliases and had similar fallout in 3 different states. Lucia wasn't his first target, just the most well-funded. She tried calling me again, 3 times. I didn't answer. The 4th time she left a message. Alex, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how bad this could get. I don't know what I wanted. Everything's gone. Adrian left. They're investigating me. I don't know where else to turn. I listened, once then, deleted it. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange part. She had gambled everything on the illusion of power and control, and lost. Not because I fought her, but because truth has weight. And when you build your life on deception, it always tips the scale eventually. She thought I'd be the one lying broken. In the end. But Lucia didn't understand something vital when you betray someone who spent a lifetime learning how to build things that last. Don't be surprised when he also knows how to let things fall without being buried underneath. This wasn't revenge. It was gravity. 2 weeks after her world came crashing down, Lucia called again. I knew it was her before I even looked at the screen. There's a specific weight a desperate call carries, like it's already asking for something before you pick up. This time I answered. Her voice was cracked at the edges, not from rehearsed emotion, but from exhaustion. Alex, thank you for picking up. I said nothing. She took a shaky breath. I need help. I know I have no right to ask, but it's my sister. She co-signed on a loan for me. If I can't repay her, she could lose her house. Adrian took everything, the account money, the emergency funds. Even borrowed against her equity without telling me. It was all in his name. I trusted him, and he vanished. How much I asked. $37,000, she said. I can't get a loan. No one will touch me now. My sister's furious. She won't even speak to me. I closed my eyes. I thought about my father, about the warning he once gave me in his workshop hands, calloused from decades of labor. People don't steal from you by accident, he said. They plan it. The apology comes after the plan fails. I opened my eyes. Lucia, I believe you're sorry. But you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it didn't work. Her silence was long. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. You're right. I could hear her crying real tears this time, not performative, not manipulative. But I didn't waver. I'm not going to save you, I said gently. Not because I want to see you suffer, but because this is the part of the story you wrote for yourself. She whispered something I couldn't make out. A goodbye, maybe, or a thank you laced with bitterness. I hung up. It wasn't cold. It was closure. That was the last time we ever spoke. She wasn't the villain in every chapter, but she was the architect of her own ending. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the one who had lost everything. I felt free. 6 months later, I sold the house Lucia and I once shared. I didn't hold on to it out of sentimentality or spite. It was simply too big for a man who now valued space not for square footage, but for peace. I used the proceeds, along with the untouched inheritance still growing quietly under the Wyoming LLC, to purchase a modest craftsman home near the old neighborhood where my father raised me. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, solid structure, and a garage with enough room for a small workshop. I spent mornings fixing things again, old clocks, broken chairs, lawnmowers that refused to start. It gave my hands something to do, and gave my mind something to focus on besides what had been lost. Eventually, I began offering small community classes on financial literacy, especially to retired workers, widows, and young couples just starting out. My father would have liked that. He always believed knowledge meant protection. And then one afternoon in the back room of a local library, I met Grace. She was a school teacher, divorced mother of 2 grown sons, and ironically the nurse who had checked my vitals every morning during my hospital recovery. She remembered me. I didn't recognize her until she laughed, kind, unguarded, real. We started slow. No big declarations, no promises. Just coffee stories, long walks, and mutual respect. She never asked about my accounts, never hinted at futures we hadn't earned yet. And when I finally told her everything about Lucia, about the inheritance, about the fall and the rebuild, she simply listened, then said, "You didn't just survive. You built smarter. We don't share bank accounts. We share books, meals, and moments. And that's enough." Sometimes starting over doesn't mean erasing everything. It means honoring what you learned and laying every new brick with intention. From a psychological and financial standpoint, Alex's story is a masterclass in what quiet strength looks like in the face of betrayal. Too often we're told that justice has to be loud legal battles, shouting matches, public shaming. But the truth is, the most powerful response is sometimes the calmest one. Alex didn't just survive the loss of love and money, he anticipated it, not because he was paranoid, but because he was prepared. Emotional intelligence isn't about never trusting again. It's about knowing when someone's actions no longer align with their words and having the courage to act accordingly. Legally, Lucia's downfall wasn't fueled by anger. It was brought about by documentation clarity and the quiet confidence of a man who had learned from his father how to protect what matters. In a world where manipulation can hide behind spiritual language or soft voices, discernment is your greatest shield. If you've ever had to rebuild after being broken, you know this. The lesson isn't just in the loss. It's in who you become when no one's clapping for your comeback. If this story spoke to you, drop a simple respect in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us we're stronger than we think.